If you're listening to this right now, especially at night, there's a good chance you didn't come here to place a trade. You came here because gold is still in your mind. The chart is closed, the platform is off, but something feels unfinished. A move you watched, a level you keep replaying, a decision you didn't make or one you wish you hadn't. And the strange thing is, it doesn't feel loud. It feels quiet, but heavy. That's not an accident. Gold has a unique way of trapping the restless mind. And tonight, we're going to talk about why that happens, and more importantly, how calm traders finally let it go and sleep. Gold doesn't just move on charts. It moves inside people. For thousands of years, gold has represented safety, survival, protection, and permanence. Long before trading platforms existed, gold already had a psychological meaning. When modern traders watch XAUUSD, their brains aren't just processing price, they're processing uncertainty. And the human mind does not like uncertainty, especially when it's quiet, especially when it's late. Behavioral research has shown again and again that the brain reacts far more strongly to unresolved situations than to clear losses or wins. This idea is central to the work of psychologists like Daniel Kahneman, whose research explains why uncertainty and potential loss keep the mind alert long after action has stopped. In simple terms, your brain is trying to protect you, even when there's nothing left to do. Gold amplifies this effect. Unlike fast-moving markets that exhaust attention quickly, gold is slow, deliberate, and often silent. This is why many traders feel more restless after doing nothing than after taking a trade. The mind craves closure, but markets don't offer endings. They just pause. And at night, when distractions fade, that pause becomes loud inside your thoughts. Historians have long noted that gold carries emotional weight far beyond its practical use. In works like The Power of Gold, gold is described not just as money, but as a symbol humans turn to during fear and instability. That matters because when you watch gold move, your nervous system doesn't experience it as just another asset. It experiences it as something tied to safety. That's why checking gold late at night feels different from checking other markets. It feels personal. It feels important. It feels like something you shouldn't ignore. But here's the part most traders never hear. Restlessness is not a weakness. It's not a lack of discipline. It's a natural response to how the human brain is wired. Behavioral finance research, echoed in books like The Psychology of Money, shows that people struggle far more with uncertainty than with bad outcomes. Knowing you were wrong is painful, but not knowing what will happen next is worse. Gold thrives in that space because it often waits. It moves when patience has already been exhausted. This video isn't here to teach you how to trade gold. It's here to help you understand why gold stays in your mind after the screen is off, and how calm traders break that loop. Not by forcing confidence, not by finding the perfect explanation, but by changing their relationship with uncertainty itself. Over the next while, nothing will be demanded of you. There are no decisions to make, no levels to remember, no actions required. This is simply a quiet explanation of what's happening inside your mind when gold feels heavy, and why letting go tonight doesn't mean missing anything tomorrow. Gold will still be there, the market will still move, and understanding, real understanding, begins when urgency ends. So let your shoulders drop a little. Let the chart stay closed, and just listen. This time isn't for trading. It's for rest. When people say that gold feels different, they're not imagining it. There is something about this market that reaches deeper than logic, deeper than strategy, and deeper than any single trade. And the reason for that starts far away from screens, charts, and modern finance. It starts in the part of the brain that evolved long before any of those things existed. Long before markets, the human nervous system learned one core rule for survival. Pay attention to what matters and never stop paying attention until it's resolved. Gold, more than almost anything else we interact with today, quietly activates that ancient rule. From an evolutionary perspective, the brain does not separate financial importance from survival importance. It simply reacts to perceived value, scarcity, and uncertainty. Neuroscience research shows that when something is both valuable and unpredictable, the brain's limbic system becomes highly engaged. The amygdala, which plays a central role in threat detection, works closely with dopamine-driven reward circuits to keep attention locked in place. This is why uncertainty doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels urgent. Robert Sapolsky's work on stress physiology explains that when the brain anticipates an unresolved outcome tied to significance, stress hormones remain elevated even in the absence of immediate danger. The body stays ready, even when the room is quiet and the lights are low. Gold has carried symbolic weight for thousands of years. Across cultures and civilizations, it represented safety, permanence, power, and protection against chaos. Those meanings didn't disappear when gold became a traded instrument. They simply changed form. Today, when gold moves, it often does so alongside stories of inflation, crisis, instability, or global fear. The brain doesn't analyze these stories calmly. It absorbs them emotionally. Behavioral research shows that the mind reacts more strongly to assets connected to survival narratives than to those associated with growth or productivity. Gold doesn't just fluctuate in price, it fluctuates in meaning. And meaning is what the nervous system responds to most intensely. This is why gold has such a strong grip on attention. It's not because it moves faster or cleaner than other markets. It's because it feels important in a way that bypasses rational filters. Daniel Kahneman's work on dual-process thinking describes how the brain operates through a fast, emotional system and a slower, analytical one. Gold activates the fast system almost instantly. Before logic has time to speak, the body is already alert. Heart rate subtly changes. Attention narrows. The mind feels like it should be watching, just in case. That sensation doesn't turn off easily at night, because the fast system doesn't understand schedules or bedtimes. It only understands unresolved significance. If you've ever noticed that your body feels tense even when you're not actively trading gold, this is why. The brain has learned to associate gold with moments that mattered, wins that felt validating, losses that felt personal, near misses that still echo. Over time, the nervous system begins to treat gold as something that requires vigilance. Not because you told it to, but because it learned that vigilance once seemed necessary. Stress research shows that the brain is very good at remembering emotional importance, even when the original context is gone. This is why a chart you haven't looked at in hours can still feel present in your mind as you try to sleep. What's important to understand here is that this reaction is not a flaw. It's a feature of human cognition. The same mechanism that helped our ancestors survive uncertainty is the one that keeps modern traders mentally alert around gold. The problem isn't that the brain reacts. The problem is when it doesn't know when it's allowed to stop reacting. When there is no clear resolution, no clear ending, the system stays open. Cognitive science refers to this as sustained arousal under ambiguity, and it's one of the strongest predictors of sleep difficulty. The body can only rest when it feels that the watch is over. This is where understanding begins to change everything. When the mind believes that rest requires certainty, it stays awake searching for it. But certainty is not something gold offers, and it never has. What gold offers instead is a mirror of uncertainty itself. Once the brain understands that this market's power comes from meaning rather than immediacy, the pressure to stay alert begins to loosen. Sapolsky's research makes this clear. Stress responses diminish not when outcomes are controlled, but when situations are cognitively reclassified as non-threatening. In other words, the nervous system calms down when it realizes that nothing is being demanded of it right now. You don't need to solve gold to sleep. You don't need answers. You need permission. Permission to let the ancient part of your brain know that tonight vigilance is not required, that the meanings attached to gold can exist without your supervision, that value does not equal danger. This video is not here to remove gold's mystery. It's here to soften its grip, to explain why it feels the way it does, so your mind doesn't have to keep asking. As you listen, something subtle often happens. The intensity fades. The sense of urgency quiets, not because gold becomes less important, but because your brain finally understands what kind of importance it holds. And once understanding replaces vigilance, the nervous system does what it was always meant to do at night. It lets go. There's a particular moment that many traders recognize but rarely talk about. The screens are off. The room is dark. The day is technically over, and yet the mind feels like it's still waiting for something. Not a price, not a signal, just a sense that the story hasn't finished yet. With gold especially, this feeling can be surprisingly strong. It's the sense that the market paused mid-sentence, and your brain is still leaning forward, listening for the ending. This isn't imagination. It's a well-documented psychological response to unfinished meaning. Human attention evolved around completion. The brain is constantly scanning for beginnings and endings, threats and resolutions. When something important starts, the nervous system stays engaged until it feels finished. In the 1920s, psychologist Bluma Zygarnik observed that people remembered interrupted tasks far more vividly than completed ones. This phenomenon, now known as the Zygarnik effect, has been replicated across decades of research. Unfinished experiences don't simply stay in memory. They stay active. They generate background tension, mental replay, and a subtle sense of obligation. Gold trading creates these unfinished experiences more often than most people realize. Gold rarely offers clean emotional closure. It reacts to forces that are invisible, delayed, or abstract. Inflation expectations, central bank behavior, global uncertainty. These are not events with clear endings. When gold moves, it often does so without giving the mind a satisfying explanation. And the brain doesn't like that. Cognitive psychology shows that when an outcome lacks a clear narrative, the mind keeps working on it long after the stimulus is gone. This is why gold feels different at night. It's not that something is happening, it's that something feels unresolved. The brain has a strong need for cognitive closure, a concept studied extensively by psychologist Ari Kruglansky. Closure is not about being right, it's about being finished. When closure is missing, the mind stays open, alert, and searching. Gold often denies that closure because its movements don't neatly align with effort, intention, or cause and effect. You can do everything right and still feel confused. And confusion is one of the most activating states for the nervous system. It keeps the brain asking questions instead of allowing it to rest. This is where self-blame quietly enters the picture. When the market doesn't provide closure, the mind often turns inward. I should have understood this. I missed something. If I think about it long enough, maybe it will make sense. These thoughts aren't signs of obsession or weakness. They are attempts to manufacture closure where none was offered. Research on rumination shows that the brain often replays experiences not to punish itself, but to resolve ambiguity. Unfortunately, ambiguity tied to gold can't be resolved through replay. There is no final answer waiting at the end of the thought loop. At night, when external stimulation drops, these loops become louder. The brain is no longer distracted, so it returns to what feels unfinished. Sleep researchers have found that cognitive arousal, not physical alertness, is one of the strongest predictors of insomnia. The body may be tired, but the mind is still on duty. It believes it's protecting you by staying engaged. From its perspective, letting go before resolution feels irresponsible. This is why simply telling yourself to stop thinking rarely works. The brain doesn't stop unfinished tasks on command. It stops them when it understands that stopping is allowed. Gold intensifies this process because it often combines uncertainty with identity. Traders don't just ask what gold is doing. They ask what it means about their judgment, their patience, their competence. Meaning amplifies unfinished loops. Behavioral studies show that when personal significance is attached to an ambiguous outcome, the brain's default mode network becomes highly active. This network is associated with self-referential thinking, mental time travel, and nighttime rumination. In simple terms, the mind turns inward and starts replaying the day, searching for a conclusion that never arrives. The key realization here is that gold doesn't leave things unfinished by accident. It's not withholding clarity. It operates in a domain where clarity is rare by nature. Once the brain understands that this lack of closure is structural, not personal, the emotional charge begins to soften. You don't need to complete the story because the story doesn't have an ending on your schedule. Cognitive behavioral research consistently shows that reinterpreting the meaning of uncertainty reduces arousal more effectively than trying to eliminate uncertainty itself. The nervous system calms when it understands the rules of the environment it's in. This is why explanation is so powerful at night. When you understand that the restless feeling isn't a signal to act, fix, or analyze, but a predictable response to an unfinished cognitive loop, the urgency fades. The brain no longer feels solely responsible for reaching resolution. It realizes that nothing is being neglected. Nothing is being missed. The loop is open not because you failed to close it, but because it doesn't close in the way the brain expects. Sleep becomes possible when the mind is allowed to redefine what finished means. Finished doesn't mean certain. It means acknowledged. It means understood. It means gently set down. Neuroscience research on emotional regulation shows that labeling and contextualizing an experience reduces amygdala activation. When you can say, even quietly to yourself, "This feels unfinished because that's how this market works," the nervous system begins to stand down. Vigilance gives way to acceptance. This video is designed to offer that kind of understanding. Not answers, but context. Not certainty, but permission. As you listen, you may notice that the questions soften. The replay slows. The need to mentally revisit charts fades into the background. This is not because you've solved gold, but because your brain no longer believes it has to tonight. And once that belief changes, rest is no longer something you force. It's something that arrives on its own. There's a common assumption that keeps many traders mentally awake at night, and it sounds something like this: if the market weren't so volatile, I'd be calmer. But when we slow down and really look at what's happening in the mind, especially with gold, volatility itself turns out not to be the real source of restlessness. The deeper issue is meaning. The human brain can tolerate movement, noise, and even chaos surprisingly well. What it struggles with is uncertainty that feels significant and personal. Gold is powerful, not because it moves, but because every movement seems to say something. Psychological research has shown again and again that humans are natural meaning makers. We don't just observe events, we interpret them. We assign causes, intentions, and implications, often without realizing it. Michael Shermer describes this tendency as patternicity, the instinct to find patterns and meaning in random or complex data. In markets like gold, where price behavior often resists simple explanation, this instinct goes into overdrive. The mind starts searching not just for patterns in price, but for narratives that explain why those patterns matter. And once meaning enters the picture, the nervous system becomes emotionally invested. Gold is uniquely fertile ground for this because it rarely trades in isolation. It's wrapped in stories about fear, protection, crisis, and safety. Even when you're not consciously thinking about these themes, your brain recognizes them. Behavioral economics research shows that when uncertainty is linked to loss avoidance or survival-related concepts, emotional intensity increases significantly. Daniel Kahneman's work on loss aversion demonstrates that humans react more strongly to perceived threats than to equivalent gains. Gold often feels like a threat narrative, even on days when nothing dramatic happens. This is why two markets with similar volatility can feel completely different in the body. One can feel noisy but manageable. The other feels heavy, serious, and hard to let go of. The difference isn't the price action. It's the meaning the mind assigns to it. When gold moves, traders often feel as though something important is being revealed or concealed. The brain treats each movement like a message that needs decoding, and messages, unlike random noise, demand attention. At night, this meaning-seeking tendency becomes especially active. Without external tasks to focus on, the mind turns inward and starts replaying interpretations. What was that move really about? Did I misunderstand something? What does this say about what's coming? Cognitive neuroscience shows that the default mode network of the brain becomes more active during rest, especially in quiet, low-stimulation environments. This network is responsible for self-referential thinking, storytelling, and mental simulation. When gold is involved, the stories can feel unusually compelling. What is important to recognize is that the brain doesn't distinguish between meaningful narratives that are accurate and those that are merely plausible. It responds to both in the same way. Once meaning is assigned, the emotional system engages. Stress hormones can rise. Attention sharpens. The mind stays alert, not because something is happening, but because something feels unresolved. Volatility alone doesn't create this state. Meaning does. This is also why trying to figure it out before bed often backfires. The more the mind searches for the correct interpretation, the more it reinforces the idea that interpretation is necessary for safety. Research on cognitive load shows that the brain under uncertainty tends to overwork itself, especially when it believes understanding will reduce future discomfort. But with gold, meaning is rarely stable. Interpretations change, narratives shift, and the search for a final explanation keeps the system awake. The calming shift begins when the relationship with meaning changes. When the mind understands that gold's movements don't carry a single decipherable message meant just for you, the pressure to interpret begins to ease. This isn't about becoming indifferent. It's about recognizing the limits of narrative. Psychological flexibility, a concept studied extensively in acceptance-based therapies, has been shown to reduce stress and improve sleep. Flexibility means allowing uncertainty to exist without immediately converting it into a story that demands resolution. As this understanding settles in, something quiet but important happens. The nervous system stops treating every movement as a signal. The default mode network becomes less activated. Thoughts lose their urgency. Instead of asking what it all means, the mind starts to notice that it doesn't need to know right now. That shift alone can dramatically reduce nighttime arousal. The brain is no longer tasked with guarding meaning. It's allowed to rest. This video is built to support that shift, not by stripping gold of its importance, but by placing that importance in context. Meaning becomes something you can observe, not something you have to chase. And when meaning loosens its grip, the mind finally receives the message it's been waiting for all evening. There is nothing to decode tonight. Nothing is being asked of you. And in that quiet understanding, sleep stops feeling distant and starts feeling natural again. There is a quiet difference you may have noticed between traders who lie awake at night and those who seem able to step away even after a difficult or confusing day with gold. It's tempting to assume that the calm traders simply know more, or that they've reached some level of discipline the rest of us haven't. But when you look closely, the difference isn't knowledge, intelligence, or emotional toughness. The difference is how their nervous system relates to uncertainty. Calm traders don't wait for the market to finish the sentence. They allow it to remain incomplete. The human mind is deeply uncomfortable with open endings. From childhood onward, we're taught that effort leads to resolution, that questions have answers, and that understanding comes from persistence. In many areas of life, this is true, but markets, and gold in particular, don't operate under those rules. Gold often moves without explaining itself. It reacts to forces that are delayed, abstract, or unknowable in the moment. When the mind expects resolution and doesn't get it, it tightens. It stays alert. It keeps checking. Calm traders aren't immune to this instinct. They've simply learned, often unconsciously, that resolution is not a prerequisite for rest. This ability is closely tied to emotional regulation. Psychological research shows that emotional regulation is less about suppressing feelings and more about how those feelings are interpreted. When uncertainty is framed as dangerous or personally consequential, stress responses intensify. When it's framed as neutral or expected, arousal decreases. Robert Sapolsky's work on stress biology makes this distinction clear. The nervous system reacts strongly not to events themselves, but to what those events are believed to mean for survival, control, or identity. Calm traders aren't calmer because the market treats them better. They're calmer because their brains no longer interpret uncertainty as a demand. One of the most important shifts that happens in calmer minds is a change in time perspective. Instead of experiencing gold as something that must make sense now, they experience it as something unfolding across longer spans of time. This doesn't come from patience as a personality trait. It comes from reduced attachment to immediate outcomes. Research on temporal perspective in decision-making shows that when people feel less pressure to resolve uncertainty immediately, physiological stress markers drop. The body relaxes when it senses that nothing critical is being decided in the present moment. This is why calm traders don't feel the same urgency to monitor, interpret, or mentally revisit gold at night. Their nervous system doesn't believe that vigilance is required to stay safe or competent. They've internalized a subtle truth. Not knowing is not a problem that needs solving before sleep. Cognitive science refers to this as tolerance for ambiguity, a trait strongly associated with lower anxiety and better sleep quality. Tolerance for ambiguity doesn't mean liking uncertainty. It means no longer treating it as an emergency. Another quiet but powerful difference is how calm traders relate to responsibility. Many restless traders carry an invisible sense of obligation, as if they are personally responsible for understanding or anticipating gold's behavior. When something doesn't make sense, that responsibility turns inward. Calm traders let that responsibility dissolve. They don't see the market as a test they must pass. They see it as a system that exists independently of their attention. This shift aligns with research on locus of control, which shows that individuals who don't over-personalize external uncertainty experience lower cognitive stress. This isn't a skill you force. It's a state that emerges when the nervous system feels safe enough to disengage. And safety, in this context, comes from understanding. Once the brain understands that gold's lack of clarity is structural, not personal, it stops demanding resolution. The mind no longer feels like it's abandoning a duty by resting. It feels like it's stepping away from something that doesn't require supervision. As night arrives, this makes all the difference. Instead of replaying charts or searching for meaning, the mind begins to slow naturally. Thoughts lose their sharp edges. Attention widens. Sleep becomes less of a goal and more of a consequence. Neuroscience research on cognitive load supports this. When the brain is no longer tasked with holding unresolved responsibility, it downshifts into restorative modes more easily. This video is meant to help that shift happen gently, not by teaching you how to be calm, but by showing you why calmness emerges when pressure is removed. When you realize that gold doesn't need to be finished for you to be finished, something softens. The mental grip loosens. The day feels complete, even without answers. And in that completeness, the body finally understands that it's allowed to rest. There's a subtle misunderstanding about sleep that keeps many traders locked in a quiet struggle at night. We tend to think of sleep as something we use to escape the market, as if resting means turning away from something unfinished or unresolved. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Sleep isn't avoidance. It's the brain's way of completing what waking consciousness cannot. And when it comes to gold, this distinction matters more than most people realize. Throughout the day, your brain is constantly processing information, emotion, and meaning. With markets like gold, that processing often remains incomplete. There are unanswered questions, emotional reactions that didn't fully settle, and interpretations that never quite landed. The waking mind tries to hold on to these loose ends, believing that staying alert will somehow bring resolution. But the truth is, the brain was never designed to finish everything while awake. That's what sleep is for. Neuroscientist Matthew Walker, in his research on sleep and emotional regulation, explains that sleep allows the brain to downshift from problem-solving mode into integration mode. It's where intensity softens and meaning finds its place. Gold feels especially difficult to let go of because it carries emotional weight: fear, safety, uncertainty, importance. These emotions don't disappear when the screen turns off. They remain stored in neural circuits, waiting to be processed. During sleep, especially during a REM sleep, the brain revisits emotional experiences in a calmer neurochemical environment. Stress hormones are reduced and emotional memories are reorganized. This is how the brain learns that an experience can exist without constant vigilance. But this process can only happen when the mind is allowed to disengage. Many traders unknowingly block this process by treating sleep as something they're not allowed to have until they feel settled. They wait to feel calm before resting, rather than resting to become calm. Psychological research shows that this reversal is one of the most common contributors to insomnia. The brain stays active because it believes sleep is conditional, that once everything makes sense, once the tension is gone, rest will be earned. But the brain doesn't work that way. Calmness is not a prerequisite for sleep. It's a product of it. Gold challenges this misconception because it rarely offers emotional closure during waking hours. The mind keeps checking internally, asking whether it's safe to let go. What if something was missed? What if understanding comes later? But sleep doesn't erase understanding. It refines it. Studies on memory consolidation show that sleep strengthens learning and reduces emotional charge. You don't lose insight by sleeping. You gain perspective. The parts of the brain responsible for emotional intensity quiet down, while those responsible for contextual understanding remain active. This is why the idea of sleep as psychological closure is so important. Closure doesn't mean answers. It means permission. It means the brain recognizing that its role for the day is complete. When you allow yourself to sleep without needing gold to make sense, you're not giving up control. You're allowing the system that evolved to regulate emotion and meaning to do its work. Acceptance-based psychological research consistently shows that letting go of the demand for immediate resolution reduces stress more effectively than problem-solving under uncertainty. There's also something deeply stabilizing about realizing that the market continues without your attention. Gold does not pause or accelerate based on whether you are watching. This isn't a loss of agency. It's a release from responsibility. When the brain understands that nothing depends on its alertness tonight, the stress response subsides. cortisol levels drop. The body shifts into parasympathetic mode. This is the physiological state where sleep becomes accessible. This video is not asking you to disconnect from gold permanently. It's asking you to disconnect for the night, to let the mind understand that rest is not neglect. It's restoration. The same awareness that helps you observe gold calmly during the day can help you release it at night. Once the brain understands that sleep completes emotional processing rather than delaying it, the resistance fades. As you listen, you may notice that your relationship with rest begins to change. Sleep stops feeling like something you have to chase or earn. It becomes something that naturally follows understanding. The mind no longer guards the day. It gently closes it. And in that closing, something settles. Not because gold has been resolved, but because you have. Nothing needs to be carried forward into the night. The market will be there tomorrow, unchanged by your rest. But your nervous system will be different, quieter, lighter, more capable of perspective. That's not weakness. That's how the human brain was designed to recover. And when you let it do that, sleep is no longer an escape from the market. It becomes the final, essential part of understanding it. As we come to the end of this video, there's nothing left to figure out, nothing to check, and nothing to resolve. If you notice that your body feels a little heavier, or that your thoughts have slowed just enough to stop pressing forward, that's a good sign. It means the mind has understood something important. Not about gold itself, but about its role in your inner world. The day no longer needs your attention, and the night doesn't need your effort. Gold has a way of making the mind feel like it should stay alert, as if understanding must arrive before rest is allowed. But tonight you've seen why that feeling exists, and why it doesn't need to be obeyed. Rest doesn't come from answers. It comes from context. When the brain understands why it feels pulled, it no longer has to resist or chase. It can simply let go. Nothing about today was wasted. Even the uncertainty has already begun to settle into something quieter. If this video brought you a sense of calm, even briefly, then it has done what it was meant to do. This space isn't about fixing traders or correcting behavior. It is about helping the nervous system stand down after a long day of watching something that naturally activates it. Gold doesn't become less meaningful when you stop thinking about it. It becomes easier to carry. And sometimes the most productive thing you can do for your relationship with the market is to rest from it completely. There's no urgency to move on, but when you're ready, there will be another video here for you. Each one explores a different side of gold's psychological pull, not to intensify it, but to soften it, to explain just enough that the mind doesn't have to stay awake asking questions. Over time, this understanding accumulates quietly. You may notice that nights feel shorter, thoughts feel lighter, and the market feels less personal. That's not distance. That's balance. Subscribing to this channel isn't about staying informed. It is about having a place to return to when the noise fades and the mind starts searching for something to hold on to. These videos are meant to be companions for the late hours, not instructions, not pressure, just calm explanation and gentle closure. A reminder that you're allowed to be finished for the day without having everything figured out. For now, let this be enough. Let the screen go dark when you're ready. Let the market exist without you for a while. Nothing important will be lost in your rest. In fact, something important is already happening. Your mind is learning that it's safe to stop.